So you have to think of people over the course of their lifetime. During his lifetime, Jimmy Savile was successful. He was a media star. He was on all the shows. Do we think of him successful now? Jeffrey Skilling, who was the big guy at Enron Corporation, which was one of the biggest corporate failures, was successful. Okay. But time reveals these people to be actually not successful at all. They are failures. Okay. So we never know whether people are genuinely successful or not. We only learn it with the passing of time and history. So that's why I'm asking people to take a bigger view of success, is that it's only revealed in time.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Your Successful Self. Today, we're talking to a man that when it comes to the personal development and the self-education world, he has made his mark really well in that space. Known for all the classics in psychology, in philosophy, in self-help, Tom Butler-Bowden is my guest today. Hello, Tom. Welcome to Your Successful Self.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Well, first of all, I appreciate your time joining us on our platform because your reputation precedes you. You know, when I had the idea that, you have finally accepted to appear on our podcast, what I was telling myself was like, whoa, really? Is he going to come? Because like I said earlier, you are so big when it comes to the personal development world, with all the books that you've written, including the one that we see on the screen, Never Too Late to Be Great. I am extremely, extremely happy to have you. And by that, I want to appreciate you, for taking the time to appear on our platform. Now, for the sake of context, whenever I'm beginning every interview, I begin from the background of the guest because our platform is all about connecting our audience to successful people like yourself to learn the strategies and the tactics that you've used, along your journey to become the person that you are today. So take us from the background. If someone is asking you who you are, where you are coming from, and everything in between, the things that you've done to be the person that you are today, what are you going to say to them?
Sure. Well, just some sort of personal details. I've been in the UK for a long time now, but I grew up in Australia, and that's where I went to university and started my working life in government and career. And then I had a big change, and I suddenly got really into personal development. So I left all that behind and became a writer. It's I guess I'm a case of people whether they're wondering whether to make a break to change career. I've been there, done that, so I know what it's like to go from zero in terms of being self-employed or an influencer, whatever, creative person. To become someone who is published or got products out there and earns a living from it, etc.
Now, from what you've told me, the one thing that stood out for me was a career change, and the reason why I'm bringing it back to that very conversation is that whenever the idea of success comes into the picture for me, what I tell people most of the time is that it's not about just, being successful alone. That is the case. It's about beginning from the foundation, which is about self-discovery. First of all, getting to know who you are, why you've been brought onto the planet, and whatever you must do with your life. That is the most important thing before you think about success in its entirety. So bringing it back to you, talking about you making that career change, you had a very good job, as an advisor to the then Australian government. So how come, you made a switch to come into the personal development world, to write books? And when I'm talking about it, I'm talking about it from the perspective that such a job that you had earlier was a great job. It comes with a lot of benefit, good money. But here's the case, you left all that behind and you decided I'm going to write books. Can you let us know what informed that idea?
So I think when you're in any sort of job or career, you have an inner feeling about, I'm good with this. I can see myself doing it in, several decades' time, rising to the top of that career. But myself, I thought, even though it was a very exciting job, writing a lot of briefings for ministers and so on, great conditions, as you say. Our office was a skyscraper looking over Sydney Harbour. So it was a very good life, but I couldn't see myself being like a bureaucrat or advisor, much later in life. And at the same time, I'd always been a creative person. So when I left school, I was actually at art school for 3 years, doing like photography and art and so on. So I'm probably more of a right brain sort of person, seeing like the sort of holistic view of things than drilling down into a more rational side of things. So working in an office with a lot of people, career, government advice, I didn't feel it was really me. So at that point, I was starting to get into self-development books like Anthony Robbins, Stephen Covey, Dale Carnegie, and I was fascinated by them, and I found them very inspiring. But at that point, I didn't think, turn this into a career. Nothing like that. But I came to London, went to London School of Economics, did a degree there, and it was only in like political economy. It was only after that I thought, okay, here's a moment in time where I have the freedom to choose what I do next. I don't have to go back to the life I was doing. And I knew it would be quite difficult to start from scratch. So for a while I did like part-time work and then trying to do writing. So I didn't like do a sudden break at all. It sort of takes years in a way to get going, to change your career. But once you've made the decision, you feel good about it. I think that's the main thing. If you feel good inside, then you'll put up with any sort of difficulty or having less money because of it, because you're on the right track.
Yeah. Now, talking about that, how old were you then? And when you made the decision, to pursue this part of writing books and educating the masses, how easy or how tough was it for you? And I'm asking this question simply because usually when someone is in a certain career and they want to make the switch, the first, The first challenge that they face is from parents, family, that, hey, where you are, it's a very good space. You are earning good money.
Yeah.
Don't consider switching. So when you were making that decision, how tough or how easy was it for you?
Okay, yeah. So I was lucky that my parents never told me what to do in terms of career, study or anything. They were very good like that. So I didn't feel any pressure from them. I had colleagues at work when I left that said, "You're crazy." So that was the second element.
Yeah.
And then the third element of possible pressure was the person I was with at the moment, at the time, my girlfriend. She didn't really understand it at all. So that was probably the most difficult thing. She wanted me to have like a normal job, career, etc. She thought it was very speculative. So I think it can be difficult on other people close to you like that, if that's the case. But you just have to be strong enough and think, well, if I'm not doing this, then who am I? If I'm just living to please someone else, if I'm not doing the thing I really love, then your whole self will sort of disappear into a hole. So in a way, you've got no real choice if you believe it's your mission. Yeah.
And talking about making that choice and switching, how did you come about doing it? Was it that you had some monies under your belt? You had some resources. And the reason I'm asking this question is that often what stops most people from making the switch when they've found themselves in spaces that they feel like it's not fulfilling to them and they have to switch to another thing.
Yeah.
What stops them is the lack of resources. So with your own case, how was it? Was it that you had resources under your belt and it was easy for you, or how did
Not
you
really. I hadn't
switch?
Because I'd become student again. I didn't have like a buffer really of funds. So the whole period when I was sort of trying to become a writer, writing books on spec, trying to find a publisher, etc., I was doing like office temp jobs. I worked in...
What is office temp?
Like they bring you in for a couple of days to do like typing or something in an office work.
Yeah.
But, I worked in a bus company, cleaning, education place, so many different places just for the money. Had no interest in it. So doing that maybe 3 or 4 days a week, and then the other time writing as much as I could. So it was difficult financially, but to sort of slowly get things going. But at that time, luckily, I didn't have any kids. I wasn't married or anything. So in that respect, it was easier. It can be harder if you've got like a family already and you want to make a change. So in that case, the understanding spouse has been pretty useful. But the question about the whole practicalities, the money side, getting going, I think you just have to, there's sort of no way around. For me, I felt like I had to do it full time. There was a point I got to, I thought, I'm either going to do this full time or it's not going to work, because all the books I've done, they require a huge amount of time, each one of them, to study, to read, all the rest of it. So sometimes you just have to make a break and go full time, and sort of right,
pray.
Something happens that can keep you going with it. Yeah.
So this time around, was it that you were already a writer, or you've practiced for some time and you've should I say gotten hold of your practice to the extent that whenever you write something and you put it out there, it was worth reading, so people were giving you the attention, or it was in that process as well that you started your journey of learning how to write?
Well, I never planned to be a writer. It was more I got interested in topics, and then I thought like self-help, personal development. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if there was a book that sort of summarized the greatest books in that field? So that's what led me to write the first book, 50 Self-Help Classics. But in terms of writing skills, sometimes it's only in hindsight you realize how valuable an experience was. So when I was in the government, writing like one-page memos, briefings for ministers, you had to take in a huge amount of information and write it in sort of almost tabloid style. Because not all politicians are like super smart, right? They wanted simple. So that skill of sort of compacting things, being very, very clear, turned out to be a big skill as a writer. Because I'm always thinking, some writers, they're sort of quite self-indulgent and they go off on tangents, and they could really say stuff in, 10 pages and they take like 50. So I'm always thinking, the person reading this, is it clear? Is it clear? Is there sort of extra waffle there? So I really try to cut things to the bone, almost like an advertising copywriter. So, with anything, you just have to keep working at your skill. Just pushing it. You've heard about this sort of 10,000 hours thing. So, I definitely got that in my case, putting in the 10,000 hours. And then after a while, it just sort of becomes easier. And you're thinking more about the issue or the topic rather than the actual writing.
Now I will come back to talking about your writing journey, but I want to look at your mental health this time around when you made the switch, because often when we make the switch from one thing which is not fulfilling us to the thing that we feel it's going to fulfill us, because of the lack of resources, it kind of have a toll on our mental health. You and I know that it's crazy when you are trying to pursue something in life, and you know that at the end of the month you've got bills to pay, but you don't have the resources to cover that. It kind of have a toll on your mental health. So this time around, when you were going through all those processes, how was your mental health, and what are some of the ways that you used to level up over here to be able to focus to continue with your journey?
So I was lucky enough
because you didn't have enough resources.
No. And then the first book I wrote was, on spec. I had no publishing contract or anything. I just started writing it because I thought it should exist. So, I mean, I was lucky in that I always sort of had self-belief that it would work out in terms of a career. Maybe I was naive because there are a lot of, people in writing that think they will sort of make it big, but they don't. But often that's in fiction, novels. It's very, very competitive. In non-fiction, you find a particular niche and you become an expert in it.
Yeah.
And then people will come to you.
Yeah.
So the mental health, I guess it was hard, the sort of gap between what you believe you are and what you're providing. And then on the other hand, the facts is I'm doing like part-time jobs. I'm getting paid a pittance. I see myself as like this best-selling author, but the facts suggest otherwise.
Yeah.
So I've often wondered about it because, it comes down to psychology and different kinds of personality traits and so on. You might have, quite a lot of self-belief, or you might not. So that can sort of keep you going, even when there's no evidence for your belief.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
I'm
that's
happy
why people think you're crazy, but you just have to think it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I'm happy that you could touch on the self-belief thing before I even asked you about it, because when you talked about it, the question I was going to ask you was that how did you come about the self-belief? Because beginning on a certain journey with no idea about how it's going to pan out in the end, whether you are going to be successful or not, but you come up with this self-belief that I'm going to be successful. Something must, are like called for it. You must have known something. And because of that, you had that self-belief. So I want to know how you came about that self-belief.
Well, this is very, very interesting area, and I've just written a newsletter about it because you can call it self-belief, but other people call it like a sort of sense of destiny, which sounds a very grand term, almost like woo-woo.
Yeah.
But if you look at a lot of these sort of successful people in history, they had this self-belief and there was no reason for it.
Yeah.
It was more like they had sort of supernormal beliefs. And there's a story like Napoleon when he was a kid. So, like a fortune teller woman sort of gave him this jewel and said, I think you're going to be emperor of France. And like, who believes these fortune tellers, right?
Yeah.
But in a way, it didn't matter because he believed her. And from that point, because he believed it, that became his belief about himself. So he had this like sense of destiny that something was going to happen. So where does this sense come from of like deep self-belief? So it might come to you early in life. Like Churchill had this feeling when he was 16 that he would like come to save, Britain or save the West. And if on a practical sense, you can say, well, he had an ancestor who was like this great general in Britain. So he had that in his mind, like that's my heritage. But on the other hand, it's quite possible to manufacture this deep sense of self-belief.
Yeah.
Well, how can you do that? One way is you can put yourself in some very challenging job or position that makes you grow very quickly.
Yeah.
So it gives you a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
Another thing is that you can get yourself a mentor who totally believes in you.
Yeah.
And because of their belief, you start believing in yourself. I had this mentor when I was like late 20s, this Californian guy. He was like an industrialist. He was a friend of my family. And every time he introduced me to someone, he would say, this is Tom. He's going to be the next Prime Minister of Australia. I was like, what? But, it didn't happen, but it didn't matter. Like knowing that he believed in you that much, not something I ever got from my dad or family would say that. but it only takes one person to have that.
Yeah.
And then suddenly this sort of sense of, something great can happen, can build in you, whether you have it naturally or you manufacture it.
Yeah.
It's just super important. And it can get you over any kind of challenge or difficulty.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, talking about Winston Churchill's, way of cultivating self-belief for himself towards his journey.
Yeah.
Would you advise that in trying to cultivate self-beliefs within ourselves, we can also look at our family heritage, people who have, come before us, their legacy, and also, take inspiration from there and say that this is what the people who came before me did, so I could be able to also do something.
Yeah, for sure. So, it might take you a bit of time to look through the family tree.
Yeah.
Some people to find someone remarkable or whatever. But, there's usually someone or a friend of the family, etc. But, it's not always necessary. For instance, I was reading about Bob Dylan recently, and he came from a very unremarkable town, Midwest of America. His parents are very unremarkable. And his original name was, Robert Zimmerman. So he invented a new name. He sort of created a persona from nothing just by absorbing all the musical influences of his time. And he created this sort of air around himself that he was, something different. And he had this mentor too called Woody Guthrie, and he studied his songs and learnt them and sort of copied all the mannerisms. So if you don't have anyone in your background who sort of inspires you or is remarkable, it's totally possible just to create a new persona from nothing. And in a way, it's more freeing because you can, there's no limit really to what you can sort of manufacture. But yeah, if you do have people in your family that did something, that's a sort of it can be an advantage.
Yeah. Now I want to bring the conversation back to your journey. This time around, you've made a switch. You've started writing, and you've made a decision to start working on your first book project. Now, someone will say it's not something that you've done before. It's an uncharted water for you that you are trying to, venture into. How did you start that journey of writing the first book? Was it that, you took courses on how to, write a book, and, by that you got a fair idea about how to go about the whole thing and you did it? Or how did you go about the whole process of writing your first book?
Yeah. So really I just started taking notes about what I was interested in, like summarizing. If I'd read a book like Anthony Robbins, I wouldn't just read it. I would take tons of notes.
Okay.
And almost my notes would become a book in itself.
Yeah.
So I just thought maybe if I get like a dozen notes on famous books and put them together, I'll almost have a book myself.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really good. But then I went to a publisher and they said, look, if you're going to do this, you should really write about 50 books.
Yeah.
So I just thought, oh, God, that's so much work.
For a newbie.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that's the impossible amount of work. It's like doing 2 PhDs or something. So, but I saw the sense of it. So I just started going in earnest, like over a year, reading as much as I could, writing notes, and then sort of slowly sort of turning it into a book. And then once it was a book, I found an agent, and then they found a publisher, initially in Australia, actually.
Yeah.
And then when I moved here, found a UK publisher. So, yeah, very exciting when you get your first sort of professional, I guess, confirmation of what you're doing is on the right track, like a book contract or, with you start to get advertisers or something like that.
Yeah.
So you have to take it, very small steps, really. And then it can slowly build over time. Yeah. Is that enough information?
Yeah, it is enough. And this
Yeah.
time around, based on the help that you had, let me put it that way, based on the direction that you had from these publishers about how you should go about the whole thing, you started the journey with crafting your Facebook. And when you are done crafting it, what happened? Did the publisher, that you met and he gave you that advice, took it and published it right away, or what happened?
So I wrote really most of the book with no publishing contract. It was only when it was done that people started to get interested in it. Because at the time, like motivation, self-help was quite an emerging area. So I was lucky to sort of tap into an emerging trend. So I think that's quite important, whether it's luck or intention, that what you're doing sort of resonates with people because it's like in the air. It's possible to be doing something at the wrong time or, be unlucky that way. So, so it was published. So then you think, okay, I've got a product now. I'm set for life. I'm published author, but really it's just the beginning. And fortunately, that first book did quite well. So as soon as you do something mildly successful, your publisher or record company or whatever wants you to follow up and do another one.
Yeah.
So, which I did. And then once you have two of something, they want a series.
Yeah.
So something becomes a series.
Oh, so that's how come you came about writing all those series.
The 50 classics
books.
Yeah.
In philosophy, in business, in economics, self-help, and all those series.
Exactly, because it became a formula. So it was just choosing a different topic, philosophy, economics, spirituality, and doing the same thing. So really for the following sort of 10, 15 years, that's all I did.
Yeah.
I would just read tons of books, write about them, and then would send it to the publisher. That would turn into a book. So it just sort of slowly, snowballed. So, it was just sort of finding a niche, but you don't know, you can't know what your niche is really going to be until you put something out there.
Yeah.
And people see what you're doing, they make connections to you, they come to you. Because before you go on, I've known a lot of people who have sort of been, amateur writers or unpublished, and they're sort of too afraid to put something out there.
Yeah.
And, you have to, when you start with something, it's hard to get going because you're not known and you're trying to
get results right away.
Yeah, you're trying to get your name out there. But unless you take the first steps, put something out there, even though it takes courage, no one's ever going to come to you or give you feedback, which makes you better. So, you have to be sort of happy with negative feedback as well.
Yeah.
You see it as useful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sort of prefer 1-star reviews to 5-star because they usually tell me something interesting or some fault they hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
It's easy, you just get someone says, "Oh, that's great, Tom," but you don't necessarily learn from that.
Yeah. Now, topping up on what you said, I remember my own journey, to becoming a writer. I first started, telling people I'm a writer when in all actuality, I wasn't writing anything. So with that idea of telling people that I am this when I wasn't, is what propelled me to even begin the journey first of all.
Right.
And even though when I started writing on the internet, which is medium.com, if you compare me to some of the writers over there, my writing wasn't that great, but I didn't mind. So far as I was putting something out there and it was confirming, my idea that, I've been telling people that I'm a writer, I was good, and that's how come, I also began my journey, but bringing it back to you, there is one question that I think I haven't asked and I want to ask before I forget, which is about the challenges that, you went through in the course of, becoming a published author. Were there any challenges at all? And if there were, could you share with us some of them so that if there is anybody in the audience listening, they can know that in wanting to be such and such a person, these are the things that I'm likely to face. So I should armor myself and be prepared so that when they come along, I will be able to know that, hey, I'm aware of them, so I could be able to, overcome them.
Yeah, so I think you're starting now in writing and books. The whole landscape has changed since when I started.
Yeah.
When I started, everything was about books, bookstores, book reviews, and everything.
Yeah.
Now it's almost like, do you actually have to write a book?
Yeah.
Maybe you're better off getting 50,000 followers on Twitter.
Yeah.
Or doing a podcast.
Yeah.
Going onto Substack, writing
Articles.
in newsletters,
Yes.
articles. So, I mean, if I was starting now, it's quite possible I would have just gone that path instead of finding publishers. The thing about books is they give you credibility.
Yeah.
And they can give you real distribution. Like my books have gone into a lot of languages, like other countries.
It's sold millions of copies, which I am aware of.
Yeah. So, but that gives you credibility, but not necessarily much money, because you have to sell quite a lot of books to earn like a big income. But if you self-publish a book and you have a social media audience, you can sell that book and you get 100% of the profits.
Yes.
So even though you could sell a smaller number, you're getting in some ways more money.
Yeah.
So that would be my advice to someone now. If you can find a publisher, great for a book, because it's something you can hold and gives you that extra credibility.
Yeah.
But it's by no means the only path to influence or impacting people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. The reason I'm saying wow, or I'm using that word is that, like you said, the idea of depending on social media, if you want to be a writer and sell your books is there. But all along, I have had the belief that, yes, you could do your own thing, self-publish and stuff like that. But when it comes to some of the advantages that, when you go by the traditional route, you could enjoy, you don't get to enjoy that. And for me, the vision I have for myself as far as my writing career is concerned is that I want to be the kind of author that, when you go to the bookshops like yourself, you could find my books over there.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen most of the times with self-publishing. So in as much as the self-publishing thing is there, I have all the time focused on, the traditional publishing thing that I have to get a deal, with a publisher.
Yeah.
And that is the more reason why even after, finishing work on my first book project, almost like a year ago,
Right.
I haven't, should I say, put myself under the pressure of putting it out there, because I'm like, no, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it right. And talking about doing it right, I want to follow the traditional, publishing routes, But I appreciate you, sharing your thoughts with us on your journey so far. Now, bringing the conversation back to you once again, you've shared with me the challenges that you went through. And this time around, your first book is published, and the publishers are telling you that if this is the direction that you want to go, then it will be wise to do a series in that direction. And you started work with the other books. Talk to me about, the writing of the other books in those series as well.
Yeah. So after writing the first book about the self-help literature, the best books in the field, then it made sense to talk about the motivational classics, the success ones, the more sort of like go-getting books.
Yeah.
So then that was successful. And then we did one on the spiritual classics, because there's so many of those that are very important in history. And then after that came psychology classics. And the thing with the series is, just like if, you produce a series of films, you never really know which one's going to be most successful.
Yeah.
There's that old saying in Hollywood, no one knows anything. Like, people think they know what movie is going to do well, what isn't, but some, blockbusters have tanked, costing 300 million. Other movies that cost nothing go on to be a success. So again, coming back to this thing of putting stuff out there, you never know which of your cultural products are going to do well or not.
Yeah.
So in terms of a series, I just was like a machine for many years, putting books out there, products. And after it was published, and sometimes didn't even think about how it was going to do, because I was on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So there's that thing, from Hinduism, that you have to separate the fruits of your actions from the actions. You just do something because you love it. You focus on the process of it. And then once it goes out into the world, it's beyond your control. So you don't think about that. So with my books, I mean, some of them did really super well. Others, not as good as I expected. You never know, but once the thing is out there, you probably know from each time you publish one of these shows.
Yeah.
You don't know how many views it's going to get on YouTube.
No, I mean, we are a fairly new platform. We are quite small. So when I even picked up the information that you'll be coming, on our platform, like I told you earlier, I was so shocked. I was like, we are so small, this is the kind of person he is, and he has accepted to appear on our platform. Like, how possible? And I was saying that in comparing you to some of your folks in the personal development space who are big, and when it comes to doing podcasts, they wouldn't consider coming on a podcast like ours because it's a new platform and it's very small.
Yeah. No, I mean, I believe everyone's. You should be open to any sort of invitation.
Yeah.
And trying to get your stuff out there. Because my first book, at the time, the Self-Help Classics, I sent it off to a bunch of people to get a testimonial or a quote.
Yeah.
And I sent it off to Stephen Covey people, in Utah in the States, to his office. He wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which has sold like 30 million copies.
Yeah.
And he liked my book, and he sent back a fantastic testimonial which helped sell it. So you never forget things like that, and you pass it on.
Yeah.
And everyone deserves breaks. And also Joe Barnes said you were great.
Yeah,
So I listened to Joe.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate you, with honoring our invitation, but I want to bring the conversation to this book that we have on our screen, because the content found in it is just so awesome that before this day, when I read it and I came to the realization of it, I was like, how come I have never looked at things from this perspective, So I'll bring the conversation to it. But before that, one question that I'd like to ask you is about how, you juggle between having a family and, your work. Because at the end of the day, if you are a single individual without a family, then you have nothing to worry about, focusing all your energy on this area or this career aspect of your life. But you are a family man, and, I want to understand in all of it how you were juggling, both worlds.
Yeah, well, I mean, because of my single-minded obsession with what I was doing and books and so on, that to be honest, that was one factor that led. I was married and then got divorced.
Yes.
But I had a daughter who's now 19. So if you have a kid, it sort of inspires you, fires you up to keep doing stuff. So you sort of give them a good life. I guess it's probably harder for some people if they have a family to be so single-minded. But as I said earlier, it is, at the end of the day, it is your life.
Yeah.
So you have to go with that inner voice that's telling you what you should do. You think of Jeff Bezos when he was starting Amazon.
Yeah.
He had this thing called regret minimization framework. You've heard of it.
Yeah.
Where you imagine yourself at 80, looking back and thinking, when I was 28 or 34 or whatever, would I have regretted not taking that step? And you don't want to be in a position where you say, yes, I regret that.
Yeah.
So, the culture, family, society, employers, etc., they are all pressures. And, obviously you have to earn living, etc. as well.
Yeah.
But you should never give up on what you think your calling or mission is, or, what you have to give to the world.
Yes. Well, I appreciate that so much. Now, I'm bringing the conversation to the book. And like I said earlier, when I picked this book and I read a few chapters into it, I never focused that much on the message as in it being a book about thinking the long term as far as success is concerned.
Yeah.
The first thing that occurred to me was about learned helplessness. I was like, wow, this is an issue that has engulfed us as a world for so long. And so this book coming along, it is the solution to that very problem. Until when I went along reading it and I discovered that, oh, yes, it solved the problem of what's the word? The problem of learned helplessness. But at the same time, it's all about success, thinking over success in the long term and knowing that every good thing in life doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. So I want to bring the conversation to the book. Now, first of all, the first question I want to ask is, before making the decision to write these books, what did you see, as far as the personal development world is concerned, and because of that, you took the step to write this book. Now, I read somewhere that, when you had enrolled back to college and you were working as a newspaper, magazine seller, whatever, and you happened to read some of the newspapers and the magazines that you used to sell, the one thing that occurred to you was that, everything that you read about success was all about the overnight success. People were not giving people time, to realize their full potential.
Yeah.
And it was all about the overnight success and stuff like that. Was it because of that, realization that made you take the step to want to write this book in the first place, or what?
Well, because I left school, went to art college for 3 years, and then I dropped out, and then I went to university. I felt like I was like 3 or 4 years behind my friends and my peers in terms of getting started in life, because I sort of started again from scratch. So I got very interested in this thing of at what age people become successful.
Yeah.
And every time I'd read a biography or whatever, I was thinking, oh, well, what were they doing by the time they were 25 or 30 or 35? And I was thinking like me, or am I too late, etc. So, and then I started getting into the whole personal development literature, which, as you said, is very much about becoming successful very quickly, making $1 million or doing this or doing that. So there was very little about time, the role of time in success. So for me, that became like the missing link. Once I realized that every successful person usually takes, decades to sort of often get into their stride, suddenly I was like, oh, relax. Okay. At the time I was like 26 or something. I felt like a weight lifted, because I thought, actually, I've got tons of time.
Yeah.
I've got decades to get going, to choose what I want to do, to be successful.
Yeah.
I don't have to have this thing like learned helplessness.
Yeah.
Poor mental health because I'm worried about I haven't got anywhere.
Yeah.
So once I realized this thing about the role of time and success, I realized, okay, that I felt much better about it all.
Yeah.
And that was the message with this book I wanted to give to others.
Yeah.
It was like, you're okay.
Yeah. And for me, like you said, it's one of the reasons why I love the book when I picked it up, because when I read it, I was like, now the pressure could be off, because you and I agree that the culture that we find ourselves in as the Western culture, it's all about, that thing, like become successful now or you are nothing. And so when people have gotten to an age like 30, 40, or even 50, and they haven't achieved anything, they feel like they are failures. And that is where the idea of learned helplessness, sets in. But with your book and the revelations that, you put across in the book, you make the reader get to know that, hey, it's not about what the culture is telling you. It's about the reality and what the research is saying. And I'm happy that you could bring about, what's his name? The guy behind the magic of thinking big. David Schwartz.
Oh yeah, the Schwartz exercise.
Yes, you could bring in that exercise, and I did the exercise
did it?
myself. And before I go in there, I want to state this in here that based on the revelation and the research that you carry across the book, if you are someone out there, you are watching us, and you are 20 years old, based on the calculation that you presented in the book, that based on the new research in science and in medicine and in technology, unlike our forefathers, we are able to live up until at least 80 years old before we die, more or less.
Productive lifespan from age 20 to 80, basically.
Yes. And so if you start work from the age of 20, out of the 80 years that you have as your lifespan, you have 60 years of productive years ahead of you.
Yeah.
And you did some calculations in there that you said when you are at the age of 20 years, you have 60 years and 100% of productive years ahead of you. If you are 25 years old, you have 55 years and 92% of productive years ahead of you, and so forth and so on. I did my own calculation at this age at 36, and I realized that if I deduct 36 from 80, I have 44 years and 60 years of productivity, ahead of me. So why the rush in the first place? So those are the revelations that I came across from the book, and I loved it. And I'm also happy that you could carry stories of people who have made their mark on the world in the book, for the reader to get to know that, hey, all these people that we look up to them, as our role models and stuff like that, this is how their life went about. And overnight success isn't actual success, but the one that is slow cooked, and you spoke about Winston Churchill, his political life, how things, went about with him, that in spite of everything, true success came to him when he was around 60 years old. And you made mention of another British political man, which is William Higgs. You talk about this
William
man.
Hague.
Yes, he had success earlier on in his life, but later on, it didn't last.
Yeah, that's I think I've got a whole chapter on stories of people who were successful when young, or won a prize or whatever, and then they felt great, and then after that, there wasn't like people weren't knocking at their door all the time. So often these people had early success, then they had a sort of wilderness period, often 10, 15 years, like Churchill, many writers, until they were sort of successful again. So I think that if you're watching this, you feel like you're in some sort of wilderness period of time. The advice in the book is that you have to sort of like, admit that you're in this period, and just sort of relax into it and enjoy it and see what you can learn from it. Things are not happening for you right now. So if they're not happening, what should you be doing? You should be increasing a skill, studying something. I mentioned like Sigmund Freud, Charles Darwin, a few other people. And they had these periods like often a decade of silence where they were just working away. They had no public renown. They were just focused on what they were doing. But without that period of 10 years, they would never have become the person they became, what they were famous for. So you have to have this sort of mental resilience to immerse yourself in these periods where you're not getting any recognition, and use it in terms of what you're going to become in the future. Throw yourself into the process of it. So things like wilderness periods, they're sort of taboo, as you said, in a modern capitalist society where nothing seems to be happening, and it causes people to have a sense of desperation. So I say in the books totally the opposite. It's okay. In the span of 60 years of productive life, 10 years is, it's less than 20%.
And I'm happy that you could talk in the book about even people who have enjoyed overnight success, like quote and unquote, we see them to be. You talk about them in the book that even some of these people that we see them to be, in those spaces, their overnight success isn't actually overnight success, and it could be that, and it's not even it could be that. It is that, they started working on their craft when they were children.
Yeah.
So by the time they come into the limelight and you will be projecting or thinking that it's overnight success, they've been giving like 10, 15 years to their craft before you seeing it.
Absolutely. I think I've got most of a chapter in the book about Ray Kroc, who started McDonald's.
Yeah.
And he was in his 50s by the time he bought the original or franchised the original McDonald's restaurant run by two brothers. Because for those brothers, they were happy with 2 or 3 stores. And in his mind, he could see like thousands of them across America. But the thing is, he had been a salesman selling like paper cups for 15 years, salesman selling all sorts of other things. And his wife thought, okay, we're set for life. We've got enough money for you to retire. In his mind, he was like, no, this is just the start. I've got visions. I've got stuff I want to do. And so, it's one of the sayings I like. I haven't been able to find out who actually said it, whether it was Bill Gates or Anthony Robbins, that people overestimate what they can achieve in a year and underestimate what they can achieve in a decade. And again, that goes against, what modern society, overnight success teaches us. But again, it's about relaxing into what you're doing and, waiting for it to bear fruit when it does at the right time. There's that saying, what is it, Warren Buffett said, that, some things just take time. You can't get, I've got it here somewhere. No matter how great the talent or effort, some things just take time. You can't produce a baby in 1 month by getting 9 women pregnant.
No, it doesn't make sense.
So time is what it is. Sometimes you can sort of put yourself into a situation like the 10,000 hours thing where you immerse yourself. But even doing that, you don't have control over your outcomes or the success. So that you have to throw yourself into the process or the skill or what you're doing. And then the results and time just take care of themselves.
Now, talking about that, I want to read to you, some of the things that you set up in the book that, I believe it will relate to what you are saying. And these are your words. You said, what separates the well-off of society in every sense from the poor was their appreciation of time. Class was not simply a matter of material wealth, education, or social status, but a set of beliefs and attitudes relating to time, which were being transmitted from one generation to the next.
So I think that was based on some research I put in the book about different communities and their approach to time. So I think that was that American researcher. He said what separates people is their appreciation of time. So whether they're just living for today, like consumption, or they're thinking about the future, or like investing or future education, and so on. I come back to this luxury watch, Patek Philippe. And their famous advertising slogan, which is, you never really own a Patek Philippe watch. You are just holding it so you can pass it on to the next generation. So, I mean, that sums it up. People who think in terms of decades, in terms of like the next week or the next paycheck or whatever, it's about investing in yourself, investing in others, and taking that, having that long-term perspective, as I think that researcher called it.
Now, I mean, our audience, watching us, definitely they are going to grab the book and read it and help themselves with it. But before that, I want you to touch on the issue of learned helplessness, which you've spoken a bit about that. Based on the research and what you've seen, if someone is in a space, even though you've spoken, quite a bit about some of these issues, then they are in a space whereby maybe I am 30, I am 40, I am 50. I haven't achieved anything with my life yet, and they feel like life has gone past them and they cannot do anything. What advice could you give to these people so that they can have their mojo back and take life on once again? And I'm saying this because from reading your book, I came to a realization that even someone being at the age of 65, which culturally we feel like it's the age for retirement.
Yeah.
From your research, you indicated that this person still has at least 25% of productive years ahead of them to do something. You know, so with such a person or such people, what can you say to them? People suffering with learned helplessness.
Yeah. So I think, well, for me personally, what I've found is just learning about all the people who are the same age as you, what they went on to do after that age. I mean, it seems a very basic thing to do. So the book is just like hundreds of vignettes, stories, examples of people who did such and such a thing at a certain age, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 even. So I think that is just, you know, inspiring to see what other people have done. So I wouldn't necessarily look at your friends or colleagues or peers. You really need to have a different sense of time to your peers. I think that's important. So don't necessarily take success or life advice from your mates in the pub. Instead, be reading biographies, looking at inspiring films about people. You know, let them be your mentors or your mastermind. And once you do that, whatever sort of state you're in, like mentally, that has to lift you up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how. All I can say is that's how it was for me.
Yeah, yeah. And topping up with what you've said, I want to read some of these words that, you know, I came across you talking about in the book, you know, so that the audience, the one that, you know, are suffering from learned helplessness, could know that whatever you've said is really true. You said early success is a double-edged sword. It makes you someone, but also creates a weight of expectations and typecasting that can prove almost too heavy to crawl out from under. And you were making that statement referencing the British statesman William Hague, you know, who enjoyed early success in his career as a political figure, but later on that success didn't last, you know.
Yeah. So he became the Tory party leader.
Yeah.
But he was relatively young at the time, and it was a bit disastrous.
That was around 30 years, right?
Yeah. So he was. I mean, it's a long time ago now, but it was quite a lot of sort of gaffes and things went wrong with it.
Yeah.
But he was a guy who was very interested in history and foreign affairs.
Yeah.
So, you know, years later, when another Tory government got into power, he became the foreign minister.
Yeah.
And that was a role that was perfectly suited to him and his interests. Yeah. So sometimes it's a matter of just, you know, waiting for your opportunity to come. You might not be the right sort of person for the times in a way. But coming back to Churchill, he had a long wilderness period. It was only when Hitler came to power and people remembered, hey, what has Churchill been saying all these years, you know, about Hitler and totalitarianism? Suddenly he became, you know, the right man to lead Britain. Yeah. So I think it's another lesson to never give up on what you know, your beliefs.
Yeah.
Don't sort of give in to fashions.
Yeah.
If you've got a particular view on the world or strong beliefs, stick to them, because the times are always changing.
Yeah.
And that, you know, eventually if you live till you're, you know, a good long life, the times will always come to suit you and what you're doing at some point.
Now, the next question I'd like to ask you is about, since the time you wrote this very book, you know, and the message that you put across, and I know very well that you also do with your newsletters, you know, do you think now the paradigm is shifting, you know, as far as some of these beliefs and ideas that we have, you know, as a culture is concerned, that now, people are ceasing to believe in the idea of overnight success and thinking that no, overnight success is a sham. It's an illusion. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Success rather takes time, and so we have to think the long term and look at things from the long term perspective. Would you say the paradigm is shifting?
I think it has a bit, yes. Because in some ways it's like seeing older people be successful as well. When you got political leaders who are 78 or 80 or something, and you look back at their career and they've often usually had like 3 careers, maybe in business or something else. They've had a family, and then suddenly, their time comes. So I think, as you said before, I got a chapter in the book about increasing longevity.
Yeah.
Just the times people used to have a life expectancy that people were worn out by the time they were 45, like manual laborers.
Yeah.
Now, if you're fortunate, you can have a very long life. You can have multiple careers, multiple chances at doing things. So I think that's very important. And then the other thing, which is sort of a bit tangential to what your question is, but I think still important about how views have changed in a way, is that there has been a fashionable view, Malcolm Gladwell brought it up, about how environment is everything. People, he looks a lot of like software kings and so on, that he says were fortunate to have been born in the mid-1950s. Therefore, they were, by the time like the whole software boom happened, they were just the right age to take advantage of that. Or in the book, I try to debunk that, take it apart, and have other examples of like Larry Ellison, who started Oracle. And he was well into his 30s by the time he really got going, before Oracle was created. He wasn't like this 22-year-old wonderkind, like the guys who started Google. So
Larry Page and the other guys.
So whatever example someone comes up with for overnight success, I can come up with other examples saying, no, the total opposite happened. People took years and years. It's just, I think, because we have a fascination of people being young and successful. I don't know why it was. This youth obsession wasn't always with us.
I don't know, but would you say, or would you agree with me that it's because of social media? Because when you go to Instagram and all those places, what do you see people portraying over there, which majority of them are fake, I believe is the reason for this mindset. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely part of it. But I think, already we've seen social media people who burn like a flame and then it goes out and you stop, and then you hear they've got mental health issues or something, or there's been some scandal. So, again, I think you have to sort of be true to yourself. Find your right medium. Maybe it's a book, or maybe it's a podcast or YouTube or newsletter or anything. Often, because there's so many medium now, it can take you years to really find out what suits you best. Your way of speaking, or how long it takes you to say things. So I think that's a sort of underrated challenge for us now. In a way, it was easier when there was smaller number of, there were just books or TV, or now it's totally open-ended. So part of your challenge is not just your content or topic, it's your medium as well.
Now that brings me to another thing that I took from the book that you wrote in there, and you were like, and I'm bringing you to what you've said. You said, whenever you find yourself saying, at my age, I should be whatever, or why aren't I like whatever, focus on your domain of experience and do what you possibly can within it now. The rule of life is that we never seem to progress until we have first fully lived out of the possibilities in the situation we are in now. And when I read those words, bringing it to what you've just said, I was like, whoa, this man, like, and for me, the reason why I'm saying what I'm saying is, whatever I'm saying is that I kind of try to imagine, how you came about some of these revelations, and you decided to write about it in the first place,
Well, I mean, sometimes there's examples in the book of like learning from nature.
Yeah.
I talked about the bristlecone pine in California.
Yes.
Which can live, I can't remember how the longevity of it, but it's like centuries and centuries.
Yes.
And you see them, they look like small bushes.
Yes.
But, they cling on to the rock and, in all kinds of weather. Mm-hmm. So, and then another example in the book is about these runners in Central America who are famous for their long distances. Mm-hmm. And some of the earlier runners, they would put them in a marathon, 26 miles.
Yeah.
And they didn't do very well.
Yeah.
And people were like, why, what's going on? I thought you guys were meant to be the best runners in the world. And they get to the end of the 26 miles and they just think, what, that's it? It's so short.
Yeah. I remember that story, coming across it. And I was like, whoa.
These guys used to doing 100 miles. So, I personally, I get a lot of inspiration from nature, seeing very old trees and, the landscape, old landscapes.
Yeah.
It sort of makes you think, oh, okay, there's no need for panic now. Yeah. Things just come into being at their own pace.
Yeah.
When they're ready and, slow flowering. Yeah. So that was one inspiration I had. But yeah, it's a good question. Why was I thinking about time so much? I guess I was a student of history as well.
Yeah.
So that was another thing. Seeing things come and go, civilizations come and go. That there's always scope to sort of insert yourself into events.
Yeah.
And to sort of have some sort of impact. There's always scope. Yeah. There's always opportunities.
Yeah.
Larry Ellison, who I mentioned, he said, I don't know if there's ever been any time in history when there hasn't been opportunities. Mm-hmm. The Malcolm Gladwell thing is, oh, they were lucky because they're the right time, or no, there's always opportunities, whatever your age, whatever the era.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, someone will say, you've written all these great books, 50 business classics, 50 self-help classics, 50 success classics, 50 spiritual classics, 50 psychology classics, 50 philosophy classics, 50 economic classics, 50 political classics, the one on the screen, and now with the new classics that you've done with Capstone, which I'm going to show to the screen, which is on the shortness of life, the Stoic classics. The question someone may ask is that, are there still something, on the horizon that we have not seen you, come out yet that, you're thinking about, bringing it out?
So I hopefully will sort of put all these stuff that I've written together into more focused, thinking or books or works. So my big thing at the moment is really the theory and philosophy of success. Mm-hmm. So my Substack newsletter is really just every couple of weeks looking at some new angle of success or theory. So not just like success tips or motivation, but going a bit further, have a bit higher level. Yeah. What have people said about how success happens in the past or history, learning from different subjects. Yeah. So I do think that a real holistic theory of success is still yet to be written. Mm-hmm. Like Adam Smith wrote his famous book, The Wealth of Nations, which was really the first book about economics, modern economics, how the world economy works. So I still think there's scope for do the same thing for how success works, to have a holistic theory of it. Yeah. So that's one I'm sort of edging towards at the moment. Yeah.
And I kind of say, I like the newsletters that you do, every week, I kind of read them, and I like how you tackle the subjects, like every time that you've written something around that subject, you reveal to the reader something that they've never even thought of, when it comes to the subject of success. So I want to appreciate you on that. But the question that I'd like to ask next is that now you've gone through all these processes, you've written bestsellers, millions of copies of your book sold, someone would say, are you fulfilled? Like, in spite of everything, if you look at the journey, the decisions that you've made up until this point in your life, are you fulfilled financially? Are you fulfilled family-wise? Are you fulfilled health-wise? Like, when we talk about your life in its entirety, are you fulfilled? And are you proud of the decision that you made then, that I want to be a writer and become a published author, and you've, achieved that?
Yeah, looking back, I am proud of those decisions I made, which were sort of tough at the time to sort of take a leap into the dark, as it were, because they've, borne fruit. Financially, yes, I'm pretty well off now, thinking about how the position I was in when I started. I'm very happy. I think I've got happier as I've got older. Why is that? I do sort of mental, spiritual practices, which I think are important. Physical activity is really important. Spending time in nature, having good friends, all of that's very important. So, I'd say I'm very fulfilled.
Now, you spoke about, getting happy as you get older. So with that, would you say happiness in life comes, with time as you are getting older, or what would you say?
I think when you're in your 20s, you're very worried about if you will be successful or not, or if you're earning enough money, and then you're often going through in and out of relationships and so on. So it's sort of going to be an exciting time, 20 and 30s, but I think a lot of people are not always happy about it. But I think as time goes on, you work out who you are, and you sort of get happy about what you've achieved. If you've created assets, so like you've started a business, I think it's well proven now that a high salary doesn't make people happy. It's assets that they've created, which brings happiness. Because it's all like they've invested themselves in it, and now it's paying them back. So I think things like that are quite interesting causes of happiness. And you've mentioned learned helplessness a lot, which came from Martin Seligman, American psychologist. And because he could see that in animals and humans, people would learn to be helpless, he said, what's the flip side? And then he did all this research on learned optimism, that people could learn to be optimistic. And he sort of made a whole research career out of that. So, optimism is important, but optimism is also a form of courage. Sometimes you don't have any strong reason to be optimistic, but yet you choose to be, and it takes a bit of courage. But it's important to sort of practice that, to develop that muscle of optimism.
All right, guys. We've been talking to the man, Tom Butler-Bowden, the man that when it comes to the personal development and the self-education world, his mark is really, really huge. I mean, I can't even bring myself to think about it. And we've spoken so far about his work, all the amazing books that he's written, that, one of these 50 Success Classic is one of them, in the classic series. When you go to any bookshop, both online and offline, you find a copy, you get to know the man and his works and what I'm talking about. But most importantly, for me, out of all the works that, you've done, the books that you've written, the one that, I think I've resonated most with is this one that, I'm showing to the screen, never too late to be great. And it's because of the message that it carries. And for my audience, or for our listeners and people watching us, if I have to recommend any one book out of all the books that you've written that they should get first to read before they think of reading any other book of yours, I would say they should get this book, which is Never Too Late to Be Great. Never Too Late to Be Great, The Power of Thinking Long. As well, you've come up with a new series, which is the Stoic Classics, which I have one of the copies here with me. on the shortness of lives, the Stoic classic on the shortness of life. I will show you to the screen once again. And like I've said, if you go to any bookshops, online or offline, the man is here, and you get to know about all the books that he's written, and get to have copies for yourself and bless yourself with it. Now, before we wrap up every interview, there are couple of questions that I ask our guests.
Good. I was hoping you would ask.
Before they go, but before that, what I like you to do is to let our audience know about you, if in case they want to be in touch, for help, for whichever reason, like your social media handles, if you could put it out there for our audience, so that if there is someone watching us and they want to be in touch, they can do so through that. I will be very happy.
Sure. Okay. I can give you some links you can put on the YouTube, but if you just Google Tom Butler-Bowden, a lot of things will come up. My website, the books in stores, and if you to get the newsletter that I publish, frequently, which is my most recent thinking, that's on Substack. So Tom Butler-Bowden Substack.
Now, my last question before we wrap up the interview, which I ask, every guest, when they are about to leave us, is the question of success. With all these experiences and life journey that you've been on up until this very moment, what would you say is your definition to success? Like, what is your understanding of success? And if one should ask you what is success, what can you say to them, or what are you going to tell them?
Right, I'm pleased you've asked, because I love this topic, and I've done a fair bit of thinking about it and writing about it. So I think about it from a sort of philosophical level, and I came up with a definition of success, which is success is truth. Like, it's beauty, or it's love, or it's power, or it's quality. So all of those things are like they're eternal values, and they express truth. So success is truth. And because we live in time and space, truth can only be revealed in time, in the world, in what people do. So success is truth revealed in time. That's what success is. So most people think of success of a successful career or job or products, or family, etc. But I'm asking people to think of it at a more higher level. What is truth really? It's certain values that we look for. So if you pursue those values of quality or beauty, or love in your work, whatever you're doing, that leads you to truth. And when that truth is manifested in a service or a product, people gravitate towards it because it is truthful. And that automatically becomes success. So I'm sorry to throw that at you as a sort of philosophical definition. But I think it's important that people understand it's not what we think of success is really the manifestation of it. Actual success is truth revealed in time.
Now, even though I've said this is my last question, but what you've said as far as the subject is concerned, it's really fascinating to me. So I want to dig a bit deeper in it. Why do you think success is truth? How did you come about that revelation? Because it's my first time I'm hearing this. Yes, we've had great guests come onto the podcast and everybody and their definition of success, but how you have, gone about defining it, it's my first time hearing it. Like, I've never heard anyone,
Well, it partly relates to the book, Never Too Late to Be Great. Because when I read hundreds of biographies and so on, I could see that many people become famous or successful in life. But is it real success? We only know because of the passing of time. Joseph Stalin was very successful in his lifetime. He was he was a big man in Russia. He controlled millions of people. But was he successful over the course of time? Do we think of him as successful now? No, he was a terrible tyrant. He was a failure in his life because of the effects of his life. So you have to think of people over the course of their lifetime. During his lifetime, Jimmy Savile was successful. He was a media star. He was on all the shows. Do we think of him as successful now? Jeffrey Skilling, who was the big guy at Enron Corporation, which was one of the biggest corporate failures, was successful. Okay. But time reveals these people to be actually not successful at all. They are failures. Okay. So we never know whether people are genuinely successful or not. We only learn it with the passing of time and history. So that's why I'm asking people to take a bigger view of success, is that it's only revealed in time. And even someone now who doesn't look successful, time might reveal them to be so. Vincent van Gogh, you know, we think of him now as almost the most successful modern artist ever, even though he might not have felt it in his lifetime. But time reveals the truth of his work. So, you know, success is truth.
So summarizing you, if I understood you, what I'm going to say is that what you mean to tell us is that success is all about living our truth. You know, like if, let's say, I've been born into the world to be a musician and I'm not living that, I'm not being truthful to who I am and whatever reason that has brought me into the world. So you are urging us to live that truth, that very thing that within our hearts of hearts, we feel like it is who we are. And it's the reason that has given birth to us and brought us into the world. We should live that truth, right?
Yes. But at the same time, keep an open mind. If you're that musician and you have put stuff out there, you've done things and it still hasn't, you know, got you where you want it to be, maybe it means that you should be a music agent or a producer or start a label or something. So you have to have a sort of openness of mind as well as being very, very focused. Because if you don't have that openness, you might think you've got to a certain age, you've failed as a musician. But you should be always looking for little crevices and cracks where you can do something that impacts people that's good. So stick with the music, but, you know, be
flexible.
Be flexible. Have flexible mind. And eventually you'll get where you want to go.
All right, guys, the man, Tom Butler-Bowden, he's the one that we've been having the conversation with. And like he said, when you go online and you type in his name, Tom Butler-Bowden, everything about him, his works, all the books that he's written, they will appear on your screen for you to grab a copy of them. And also when you go to Amazon or any online bookshop or offline bookshop, you can get a copy of his work and help yourself with it. Now, before we wrap up the interview, like we say all the time, we here at Your Successful Self, we are all about helping you become the best versions of yourself. So each time we are about, you know, wrapping up every interview, what we seek to tell you is that in all that you do, the difficulty, the challenges, or whatever that you go through, always remember to be your successful self. And like I've said, this is my personal recommendation from the man's work. So be glad to grab a copy for yourself and help yourself with it. And until we see you again in the next episode, remember to be your successful self.